I just want to make sure everyone is in. Can we see if they're here? Yeah? Yeah, everyone is in. So hello, everyone. This is, you can see me, I hope, on camera. And there is a chat already from Lynn. Hello, Lynn. Hi, everyone. Okay, that's great. You're all here. So welcome to our expert interview on age diversity. I'm Rena Goldenberg-Lynch, one of the co-founders, along with Inga Woodstra, who's also one of the co-hosts today. And we also have our experts online here, Jacqueline Heron. Wave to us, Jacqueline. Hello. And Steve Anderson. Hello. We will, I'll make introductions, I'll set it up, we'll get going very briefly. I just wanted to run through a couple of technical points so that everyone can benefit from the intention of this meeting, which is to be a conversation, a virtual meeting conversation. So the first thing to note is that while you may not be able to unmute yourself, you certainly can turn on the camera if you would like to. If you would like to be seen and you would like to see us, I know you can see us, we'd love to see you. We want to encourage this to be a conversation as if we were all sitting in the very same room around one very long, round, oval table. Except in this case, the tables are in different rooms across different countries even. So welcome everyone, and as more people are joining, we will start with introductions. The very first thing I want to say is a short word about the Big Fish Academy, how it came about and what we are all about, and then I'll introduce our speakers as well. And if you have any questions or comments, the place to put it all in is in the chat, which hopefully you have available to you at the bottom of the screen or at the top of the screen. And Inga will be monitoring the chat. She'll be interacting with you on the chat, and she will also read out whatever questions come up for our experts through the chat. So the Big Fish Academy, Inga and I, we are both diversity and inclusion consultants with our own individual businesses, and together we've been doing this for a cumulative of approximately 15 to 16 years separately. And as we were chatting earlier, well, actually last year, one of the things that we noted is that there is a gap in the market in terms of training for the people who work in companies and whose responsibility it is to actually start embedding diversity and inclusion. And that is how the Big Fish Academy was born. We launched it in November of last year. And this year we have a number of different training seminars, webinars, as well as these monthly expert interviews and expert conversations that are open to everyone in the public who is interested. And that is what we're doing today. Like I said, we're having a conversation with a couple of experts on age diversity. So let me introduce our experts to you. I'll start with Jacqueline. Jacqueline, hello, welcome.
Hi.
Jacqueline is an executive coach, leadership and career consultant. She has 25 years of corporate experience in senior leadership and consulting roles with Mercer and Aon, and has been coaching for several years now. She works with senior leaders as well as young graduates, so has a first-hand experience with the different generations. She also runs a workshop for us on how to bridge the different generations in the workplace. So we're looking forward to hearing from you on your hands-on experience with people in companies and how they're dealing with gender diversity, age diversity even.
Excellent. Looking forward to everyone.
Great. And Inga, actually, just before I introduce Steve, I'm wondering whether I have a setting on where people are unable to switch on their cameras. Would you mind having a quick look? Because now that I've invited them all, no one's doing it, and I'm starting to think maybe it's because I hadn't switched it on. Thank you, Inga.
Yeah, we've got some people on camera. All good. So if
Oh,
you
have
feel,
we?
yeah, feel free to
Oh,
switch on
lovely.
the camera
Okay,
so we can
sorry,
see
I
them.
must not be able to see them. Right, okay, moving on to introducing Steve. Steve, hello. Steve
Afternoon.
Anderson is the CEO of the Age Diversity Forum in the UK. And he will say a lot more about Age Diversity Forum, what it stands for. It's been around for approximately 6 years. He has been CEO for 5 of those years. And prior to setting up the Age Diversity Forum, Steve was in international banking for 20 years or more. Isn't that right, Steve?
It is. That's part of my career path. So
Part of your career path. That's fantastic. So we're looking forward to hearing a lot more about everything that you want to say. I also want to start out by having a slightly better understanding of the audience, of you, the listeners. And I want to launch a poll. Our first poll is about your understanding of the age diversity topic. That's not the right one. Hang on just a minute. Sorry, that's also not the right one. Okay, let me try the poll. Here we go. So in this poll, we will be asking you how familiar you are with the topic of age diversity. And if you can just let us know what you're thinking. If you are on the phone, you unfortunately won't be able to vote. But if you're on an app or on camera, then you should be able to vote. And we've got lots of votes coming in already. Anything from somewhat familiar, want to hear from others, to not at all, want to know the basics, to very familiar, and I want to know the new trends. So there's also an option to, if there's anything in between, you can put your vote in the chat box. Let us know how familiar you are, or maybe there's an element or an aspect of age diversity that you're familiar with that you could put into the chat box as well. Okay, so we have about 65% of the vote in, but I think the rest may be on the phone. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So about 60% of you said that you're somewhat familiar and want to hear more from us and from others. Just under 30% of you don't have any experience of age diversity and would like to hear the basics. And 15%, which is fantastic, are very familiar with this topic and would like to hear about the new trends. And hopefully we have something for everyone today. Fantastic. All right, so the very first thing I'd like to do is to start setting the scene of the workforce. I know that in a survey that was run actually a couple of years ago, 87% of global CEOs said that they are very focused on diversity and inclusion. However, when they talk about diversity and inclusion, they talk about gender and ethnicity primarily, not so much some of the other types of diversity, and age is one of them. That seems to be changing. We have quite a lot of people interested in today's webinar, so that is a good sign. But let us understand the landscape out there. Why should this be a topic? Jacqueline, would you be able to walk us through a little bit on the generations, who they are and how they are reflected in the workforce in the UK today?
Sure. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here. If I can just take a step back at the start, I'm looking at, and I'm thinking about the workforce that we have in the UK who are currently employed. And just to kind of give you a big picture view there, I've looked at the Office of National Statistics figures for the last quarter of last year. And what we're seeing there is about 46% of the workforce, and our workforce in the UK is about just under 33 million people. 46% are either baby boomers or Generation X. We've got about the remainder, 54%, are millennials or Gen Y, and starting to enter the workplace. We've got Gen Z, so that's those who are kind of 23 and under. So at the moment, our millennials and Gen Z are making up more of the workplace, and of course that's going to increase. We think by about 2025 we'll see millennials and Gen Z at about 75% of our employed workforce. So I think that gives you kind of a big picture flavour of the numbers there.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And if there's anybody on the line today who is in a different jurisdiction and has some more information on that in their country, feel free to share that with us on the chat, and then Inga can let us know what there is. I know that there are a number of you who've signed up from the state of Michigan, the government from Michigan, so hopefully a number of you will be able to comment on that. And my own information also shows that globally, actually, the workforce is not very far off what you had just outlined. Jacqueline, is there any indication of how this might change at all in the next 5 to 15 years, so throughout people's career going forward?
Sure. Well, as I said, you know, we're just by the very nature of all of us aging, we're going to see a far bigger percentage of millennials and Gen Z in the workforce. But we've got some other things happening in the background in terms of the way we work now. So overlaying that, we've got kind of culture and work and working pattern changes. So some of the things that we have to work with are the fact that within the workplace, relationships are less formal. So how do we deal with that? We tend to have flatter structures. So we've got issues around how we work across the generations as we move away from something that was more hierarchical. There tends to be less employer paternalism, so we have to be finding things out for ourselves and working more around how we make, if we're thinking about today, cross-generational work more effective. People are working longer, so although obviously we're seeing more people from the millennial and Gen Z coming through, we're also seeing people at the other end of the spectrum, obviously living longer, but wanting to be in the workplace for a longer period of time too. So we've got all of that in the mix as well as the numbers.
Yeah, very interesting. So with all this going on at the same time, Steve, I would imagine age diversity is quite an issue and a priority for organization. Would you agree?
It should be. Unfortunately not. And I'd like to say hello to everyone, and thank you, Rena, for the invitation to speak today, because it's still relatively rare to have the platform to talk about age diversity amongst the other protected characteristics, as you rightly called the likes of gender, LGBT, disability. So, but it is a business imperative. Jacqueline was just describing some of the demographic changes, and it's not just the UK that faces this challenge and the opportunities. It is an international situation, and in some areas it's described as a global megatrend. So the changing demographic in terms of an aging population and people wanting to work, willing to work, able to work, having to work for longer is something that is, as I say, a global challenge. And it's not just the right thing to do either. As I say, it's there's a business case for having some consideration for diversity inclusion on its widest basis, but particularly for age, which has that intersectional nature. As Jacqueline was also describing, everyone is of an age now and everyone will become older. And as the population of the workforce becomes older, what adjustments do we have to make, if any? What do those individuals want as opposed to, say, a younger demographic? And I would argue that everyone wants the same things. You know, they want a good place to work, they want opportunities to learn, to develop. And this is where we have to start breaking down some stereotyping and myths as well. Because generally at the work where we work with organisations, we see training beginning to wane sort of mid-30s, because you're expected to know things and you're expected to be able to, you know, carry out your job to a certain standard. And there's this perception that the older you get, the less ability you have to learn. But that's just obviously a complete myth. So yes, there's various barriers and we have to break down to ensure that everyone has those same opportunities throughout their career, because there aren't the jobs for life anymore as well. You know, we hear about portfolio careers and the change in skills and requirements needed as you plot your way through the careers, and particularly in today's world and future on the digital skills front. That's going to be a big focus for educators through to industry.
Well, certainly, even today, everyone is affected by the shifts we have to make because of the virus crisis. We're all working very differently today, and finding that we're all having to learn and relearn how to work, actually. So that's applicable across all generations. I'm going to pause there and see whether we have anything on the chat from anyone, some comments or questions. Inga, is there anything? Nothing? Nothing. Okay, so I do encourage you to keep thinking along with us, and let us know if you want to ask the experts any questions on anything.
Yes, any questions, any thoughts?
Yes, your comments and observations as well. Let's move on to the challenges. I know that, Jacqueline, you have outlined a few already, but what would be great to hear is if you can identify some of the examples that you see in interacting with people in workplaces today. What are some of the challenges that you're coming across? And also everyone else on the session, maybe there are some that you would like to share with us as well. Go on, Jacqueline.
Sure. Well, let me just go through a couple that come front of mind, and I see this a lot in the coaching work that I do, where we have managers now who have people who are older than them reporting into them, and I think that's become and will become an increasing thing, and sometimes for them that's a challenge. How do I manage that effectively? So you know, we have things around, okay, how to have different kinds of conversations with people, how to really treat everyone as an individual, how to perhaps, if you've got someone who's more experienced and they're reporting to you, working in a way that's perhaps more collaborative than directive. So helping them navigate that scenario where they have people who are more tenured or older than them. We've also got that issue with those managers where they may have been an individual contributor, they're now a manager, they may have people reporting to them who were their pals. And again, that issue of more blurred boundaries between work and personal life within the kind of millennial and Gen Z generation brings issues in terms of managing staff as well. So the role of the manager, I think, is one that kind of, in terms of crossing all generations, brings its challenges.
And how have you observed how managers and team leaders are addressing these challenges and meeting them?
Sure. I think some of the things we're seeing is, firstly, understanding how people in their team want to be communicated with. So some people, so really asking that question, and a lot of what I'm sure we're going to talk about today is around the assumptions that we make. So not assuming that the way you communicate is the way other people in your team want to be communicated with.
Yeah.
So thinking about that. A lot around being respectful of each other. So recognizing that each of us has a part to play and has got something that we can offer. So helping them almost operate in a coaching environment in terms of finding out how people want to be communicated with, and also what's their learning style. Because again, depending on perhaps our generation and our learning preferences, I might like a classroom learning situation, or I might like to go away and find things out for myself, learn online, and then come back. So those are some of the things that people are starting to dig into, and being aware of the variety of option.
Yeah. And Inga, yes, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, great point on the chat, sort of confirming what you're saying, Jacqueline, that things are really, changing, and we have a lot more of the older generations in work at the BBC. They just started. Selena says, at the BBC, I'm currently in charge of our staff networks. I've been approached to open up a new network based upon age and experience, as in a couple of years' time, over half our workforce will be over 50. And I think it's a good idea to then complement it with the under 35s network, which they already have. So yeah, definitely confirming that in the chat.
And that's great. And I think, thank you, Selena, for that point. And I know that in parts of the BBC, maybe not the broadcasting, the public service, there are in fact networks that are springing up for those who are more mature professionals. I know of one in the BBC studios that's called BBC Boulder. It's a very clever name, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a trend that's coming up.
Sure.
And then a question from Better Point. I'm not sure it's a question, but it's definitely something to respond to, from Gary. Is part of our challenge here to what you last said about helping leaders there, Jacqueline, language and intent. Leadership, helping others find their own answers, can happen at all levels, yet management remains the dominant paradigm. Reactive busyness leads to which increases barriers to inclusion.
I think that's a great point. And I think the language we use, the way we communicate is integral to making this successful. And if I can just share, there was an article, and this is a small example, some of you may have read in the New York Times a few months ago, about the use of the punctuation, the exclamation mark. So if you are over 40, as a rough guide, you tend to use the exclamation mark more sparingly. So you might say, my car is on fire, exclamation mark. If you're under 40, you're much more liberal with your use of the exclamation mark, because you see it as more kind of something to reinforce or be enthusiastic about. And as a result, their research showed that people who are over 40 think those under 40 with that liberal use of the exclamation mark are a bit over emotional and slightly childish. People who are under 40 see the over 40s as a bit standoffish, formal, and not connected. And that's the exclamation mark.
Yeah.
So we just need to think about how we use, permeate that throughout the rest of how we communicate.
I love that example, and I encourage you online to let us know where you stand on this, depending on your age. I'm just going to run a poll in a minute to identify which generation you belong to. But yeah, go ahead, Inga. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. If you stop sharing the slide, we can actually see the speakers better, and I don't think there are that many slides. So yeah, just.
Oh, okay. Is that Yeah, no, I will. I'm going to launch a poll now. Before I do, I wanted to hear from you, Steve, actually, whether what might be some of the institutional challenges that we're seeing. So obviously there is the interaction between people and the generations that Jacqueline has identified, but I know that employers are finding it difficult because of the different expectations and being able to make everybody happy with everything that they offer in terms of benefits, for instance. What other other challenges or what are the challenges and perhaps some opportunities that arise as a result?
Yes, many. I echo everything that Jacqueline said, and particularly the management team level. We hear regularly from organisations of all size and sector that is a keen issue for them. But in terms of the sort of broader sense, there's challenges around skills gaps that we hear all the time. In particular, I mentioned digital skills earlier. We work very closely with the Institute of Coding, which is a UK national programme looking to join up education through to industry to ensure that what academia is being taught now is relevant for jobs now, but jobs of the future. And there's a real challenge in terms of the speed of technology change, which is being described as something like 7 times faster than other industries. And how can particularly graduate environment keep up with the demand of industry? So we had a conference in London a couple of weeks ago where we heard from the likes of IBM and Infosys, who were saying they do internal training every 18 months. Yeah, if you imagine a graduate course is 3 to 4 years, by the time the graduate leaves, they're probably behind the curve. So there's lots of challenges in terms of flexible delivery of training and education and ensuring that industry needs are met. To help that in the UK, the UK industrial strategy was developed and released a couple of years ago. And it was really interesting for us as an organisation to see that one of the 4 grand challenges mentioned in the document, along with AI, social mobility and data management, was age, an ageing society. Now that element, the UK industrial strategy has been split to local industrial strategies, so in various regions and devolved governments. And unfortunately, through that process, there's a dilution of recognition of that challenge. So we work regularly with devolved authorities and regional governments. And the age challenge ends up being a line in a paragraph that says, oh yeah, we must do something about this. And unfortunately, that's a common, or it's not a unique approach taken by industry either. Within the UK government, particularly the Department for Work and Pensions, there is a team called the Fuller Working Lives team, which focuses on older workers in the employment environment. Yet there's such a small department, it's very difficult to effect change and effect any sort of incentive or legislative changes that would incentivize companies to go further than they are doing today. So I think it needs organisations like us, and hopefully many of the listeners and attendees on the call today, to take first steps towards taking consideration of the benefits that age diversity can bring to the workplace. And yes, look at challenges, but also recognise the opportunities that are there.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm wondering, are there any examples maybe on the chat, Inga, of some how companies are currently tackling these challenges?
Yeah, some good ones coming in. I see Miller saying, my own company has a range of employee networks, gender, LGBT, etc., but not age. By the way, note the exclamation mark, and I am over 65 here. I thought, yeah, it's actually quite a relevant point that requires an exclamation mark. So basically, the over 40s are learning, is at least 4 people said, because clearly we are using more exclamation marks nowadays. And then let me see, there is another one. which I've now lost. Oh.
Yeah,
just on
Anita
that, if I
said,
may,
yeah.
just on that, with the largest international organisations that we work with, we see those internal employee resource groups, or whatever you like to call them. And as you say, Inga, they cover many of the other protected characteristics, but age generally is the one that's omitted, even though it's as wrong, as unjust, as illegal to discriminate. It's the one that gets overlooked, but it can be the one that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, and Aviva is saying, Aviva Insurance, we have an employee network called Generations, or that they have it there. That is a spin-off from their midlife MOT initiative. Yep. So there are some companies who have it. Business in the Community is doing some great work, Anita Gray says, and they have an age campaign and various toolkits. So that might be something you'd like to look at. And some people saying, yeah, great example. My previous company, says Anita, had a multi-generational network, and I'm looking to introduce this in my current company. Yeah, so that's really combining the generations, right? So that's interesting.
It's great to hear that, and I think maybe it is an indication that things are moving towards the next age being the next priority. I think
Gowrie is saying that. She said age is gradually catching up as a diversity area. So we see that people in the chat see that too.
I think that's right. I think gradually, not just organizations are understanding the challenges, but also governments, local, regional, and even federal governments are starting to look at that. Now, in the UK, there really isn't a lot of legislation generally to encourage companies to take action in favor of diversity of inclusion. But obviously, there are people like Steve, like Jacqueline, like Inga and myself, and many more working with organizations to try to embed some of the practices and really all around being more inclusive, because that in essence is going to cut across a number of these, or perhaps even all of the various diversity streams. Inga, yes, there you wanted to
some more good points coming up. So DEXO has a generations network, so some companies do have it. And Julie's saying, I've read multiple times that ageism is the last acceptable ism, so it is something that clearly needs to catch up. And many firms are playing to catch up, is what Julianne says. And then Lynn says, they're usually referred to as generational, as age is perceived as a sensitive word. So I think a good tip there.
And I've just launched our second poll just to get a sense for where the exclamation marks are going to come out in terms of percentages, just to see how many different generations we do have on the line, as well as what the proportions are. So thank you for voting. Yeah, keep letting us in. I'm afraid my Gen X generation is ahead, closely followed by the millennials. Yes, that's as to be expected. I would imagine that the proportions are going to be very similar to what we see them in the workforce in the office as well. So just I think we're nearly there, so I'm going to now close the poll and share the results with you very briefly. So there you go. Yes, most of us on the call are in the Gen X generation, 53%, and then followed by 26% Gen Y, millennials, and then a couple baby boomers and Gen Zers, which is fantastic. Well, a great mix of people on the line. So thank you. I do hope we're hearing from all of you. So if you haven't commented yet, please do. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your experiences. We're going to move on to the next topic, and that's more around the more practical things. So some great initiatives we've already mentioned. What are some of the other things that you've seen companies do, Jacqueline, that are helping to move the discussion and the conversation further and to bridge the generations in work?
Okay. So some of the key things I'm seeing are an increase in reverse mentoring. I think that's we're seeing that with a lot of organizations now. There's a lot of great information out there. So matching up people from different generations to share their experience. So, for example, having someone from Millennial Gen Z work with perhaps someone, you know, Gen X or baby boomer around, okay, so how do we use social media perhaps more effectively within our organization? How can we identify different trends and access different markets or access potentially different clients, and opening up a whole new realization and opportunity there, and vice versa? What kind of knowledge sharing, what kind of information and experience sharing can there come the other way? So I'm definitely seeing an increasing amount of that happening. People, I think, used it as a bit of a buzzword but didn't actually implement it. They thought it was a nice idea. I'm seeing it actually being implemented across quite a number of organizations, and certainly on the agenda more.
And is that what, I'll just pause for a second and ask the audience to let me know, is reverse mentoring something that is a formal program within your organizations? I know, as you said, Jacqueline, there's a lot of talk about it. There's an increasing understanding of what it is. It was initially brought in as a gender diversity initiative, but now obviously has grown beyond that. But I'm keen to hear, is it actually happening officially? Are there proper programs? What is the chat telling us, Inga?
One looking into it, one no. Yes, one organization having it, not in mine. Inclusion is now on C-suite for the first time today in 2020. So inclusion in general is coming up in the organization.
Yeah.
Not typically, not yet. And one interesting remark there, actually, that someone made just before, that Mercedes-Benz in Germany has started a yes campaign, which I really like the language of, young and experienced, together successful.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a nice one, right? And then another yes, we've had reverse mentoring for a few years now, looking at introducing this. Yes, very focused on this at Eton. Yeah. Of course, yeah, Claire from Eton. Yeah, and Emily saying, I'm 20 and looking forward to driving. Oh, this is our one, was it millennial on the call? Or Gen Z, yeah.
Gen Z, yeah.
Was it? Yeah, the youngest generation. I'm 20, looking forward to driving a reverse mentorship initiative in the next few months. Oh, great. Nothing in place yet at all, and not widely discussed in the business. No, it is, a lot of businesses are playing catch up, right?
Yes, yes.
Nothing in my company. I do mentoring to junior staff, and I learned something back from that, but it's not formal. And someone saying, love the yes campaign. Yeah, Anita, I love it too.
Yeah. Jacqueline, were there any others that you wanted to share with us before I interrupted?
Just a couple of things. One is when companies are looking at diversity and inclusion training, is extending that to take account of maximising the opportunities that we have to work across the generations. So things like, as we referenced earlier, the assumptions we make, the language we use. So bringing in things like snowflake, is that acceptable? What does that say? Yeah. Things like, I don't know if MD saw a reference, but it's become a bit of a thing with, I think it was a New Zealand MP or an Australian young woman who somebody else in their parliament said something, and she kind of threw away with an okay boomer thing. So, and that's become things. So again, extending that realization of the impact of the words and the language that we use within diversity training.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, because Inga and I, we do some training on what we call inclusive behaviors, and the use of language is one of them. So it is absolutely important with regard to any diversity characteristic, be it age, ethnicity, what have you, and it comes up in so many different ways, and it's really about thinking what you're saying and how it might land. So coupled with empathy, which is another inclusive behavior as well. No, thank you for that. That's very helpful. Steve, what do you think a company that is just starting out on its age diversity journey might do? What is a good sort of entry level thing for them to do?
I think there's various things about taking the first step and recognizing that the age is an important value. I'll give an example of someone that we began to work with quite recently. I won't say who it is, obviously, but a national financial institution that through a questionnaire that we provide to our early partnerships, is to help them gauge where they are on that journey. And although there was written policy, there was nothing in practice to actually disseminate that message and that value through the organisation, to the point where they recognised that it wasn't actually a corporate value. So I think it needs leadership, certainly, but it also needs sponsors and advocates throughout the organisation, whether that's through internal networks or otherwise, to ensure that that message is transferred. And coming back to the multi-generational discussion, that's very much from where we come from. It's just not about older workers. It's about integrating all generations together and having that collaborative working environment that actually produces innovation. It extends skill development. It actually bridges skills gaps. It's great for things like succession planning. But in terms of some more immediate things, on the recruitment front, I think there's some ways and means of HR departments to demonstrate their consideration for all age groups when they're looking to recruit into the workplace. I think through just the normal appraisal process, which again, I say that with a bit of emphasis because again, we found through our work that appraisals can begin to falter, let's say, or maybe the same attention isn't given as one is going through their career. And that's such an important benchmark, at least once a year, to confirm someone's current personal development, training development, and how that actually meets the needs of the organisation. Because if that begins to divide, then the actual organisation will begin to suffer the output, the productivity, performance. Again, this is where we come back to the business case. We're always asked about, yes, we know it's the right thing to do, but what's in it for us? So what is that business case? The good news is there is absolutely a business case for considering a multi-generational workforce and achieving benefits from that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I also heard that a number of organizations are flexing their benefit packages to make sure that they address the different expectations of the different generations in the workplace. Is that something you've come across as well, either Steve?
I think generally, sorry, Jacqueline.
No, carry on, Steve.
Flexibility is something, again, that I think it used to be one of those perceptions that flexibility in the workplace is only required by a certain demographic, normally the older demographic, because maybe they're ill more, which they're not. They need more time off, which they don't, or they've got other caring plans, which are not unique to the older workforce. Young families now, they want that work-life balance. I think that's a big change between the demographics as things as society has moved on. I know from my own experience that I got that completely wrong when I worked in a city. But that flexibility of working, whether it's working remotely, as we're all doing now, and having that technology available to do that, and taking steps to allow people to do that. So goes with that, what type of compensation packages are available, and the flexibility within that. And there's a whole spectrum of opportunity there, whether that's for looking after young children, whether that's actually taking a bit more time off in certain parts of the month, whether it's actually working longer in certain parts of the month as well. So I think the flexible working remit is now applying to everyone in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great observation. And again, we're mentioning the kind of changes in the workplace that will benefit everyone, not just a particular or a segment of the population. So I think that, going back to my thing about inclusion, Jacqueline, were you going to say something more about that?
No, no, it was really the points that Steve was making around comp and BEM packages.
Yeah, yeah. And what on the chat? What have we got there?
Some questions coming in. So it's looking for some practical suggestions, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's saying we have formal coaching but no formal mentoring. Mrs. Miller sharing, we do arrange career stories as part of our career network, where more experienced people talk about their career to our younger colleagues. This has highlighted the fact that careers are like a jungle gym rather than linear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And measure the demographics is a tip from someone. Then someone asking, well, what are other ideas showing more tenured individuals, a nice word there, that they are valued? And then someone else, Mrs. Miller again, saying our company has removed age and minimum experience from job adverts. But it'd be good to hear some more practical ideas. Yeah, I think.
Well, some other practical, if I may step in, to help develop training. I mean, Rena, you mentioned something called Bolder. Actually,
Boulder, BBC
Barclays
Boulder.
do some really great things in this space. And I think it's about 3 years ago, they introduced their own Boulder program, program, for degree apprenticeships. And it was a great way not only to use the levy that has been pretty contentious, but it's a great way to invest in the staff to develop their skills for the demands of the workplace. And actually that really helps with redeployment and transitioning within the workplace as well. Because as skill sets move, as design of new product opportunities come to reflect the society that we live in, which you would imagine, I would imagine most companies actually, consider that when they're considering their markets that they go into, but actually there's a lot of bigger organizations that they're not actually thinking in that way. So if you've got that multi-generational workforce that is working in collaboration, that is reflecting the markets that they're in or could potentially move into, they can be more successful in their product development through that collaboration. The one other area that's is very topical at the moment is procurement and supply chain, and extending values and standards through one supply chain to improve the return on, basically getting better value for money, but improving the standards of delivery. And that's all surrounding social value and the Social Value Act, particularly likes of, no one's mentioned the B word, the Brexit, but I'll throw that in.
Forgot all about that already.
But it became a big social value. Part of social value is procurement and supply chain. So how, as Brexit materialises, how does an organisation begin to satisfy its procurement and its buying, basically, and ensure that it's getting the best return on that investment. So a consideration by extending that value and those standards absolutely achieves that for companies.
And I think what I'm also hearing more generally is that some of the ideas that we have already started implementing to address diversity, gender diversity or ethnicity, could very well work in this category as well. And so some of it is maybe not around to reinventing the wheel, but working together. It's that intersectionality element as well.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to say our peer group is the likes of Stonewall for LGBT and Business Disability Forum. I'm sure hopefully most of your listeners will know, because they've been around a lot longer than we have, but I've got to know those organisations very well in terms of their chief execs, and they have the same challenges. So whichever part of the D&I agenda that you're considering, there are very similar challenges, but opportunities that transcend across the different streams. So you're absolutely right there, Ian.
Yeah. I'm going to launch my final poll, which is really to hear more about what your company is doing or where it is on this this journey. Has your organization introduced any actions or activities or initiatives to address age diversity? So the choices are no, So we have generation defined networks, e.g. young professionals or mature workers, as we've mentioned already on this talk. Yes, we have some, and I've asked for input in the chat of the type, and some of you have already started sharing, and other. Anything in between, and by that I mean maybe there is something that has been tried in a different guise that has in fact helped the age diversity conversation as well. So do share with us your thoughts. I'm a little bit surprised to say, but maybe I shouldn't be, that the majority of the incoming poll input says no, that the organization doesn't. I know that Steve, you were saying that earlier as well,
Yes.
that's your experience as well.
Absolutely, that's not a surprise to us.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I am a bit
Yeah.
surprised actually, yeah. And Jacqueline, you as well, right? You're not
Yeah.
surprised?
I'm not surprised, and if we think about the theme right at the start of the session today, a lot of people were saying this is just something that we're beginning to get to grips with and is coming to our attention now. And to be honest, I think the current environment in which we find ourselves gives a huge amount of opportunity for us to start thinking about doing some of this differently.
Yes. Well, we're nearing, we have about 10 minutes left, and what I want to also address now is some tips for organizations, some more practical tips that we can do. And in particular here, I'd love to hear from you, Steve, in terms of the Age Diversity Forum. What is it that you actually do and offer organizations, and how can you help?
Thank you, Rena. Yeah, I don't want to go into a sales pitch or anything like that.
We want you to sell. Go on.
But the fact that the majority of the listeners are not doing anything
People are already
right now,
asking for your details in the chat, Steve. So go on.
Oh, there you go, Steve.
well, thank you.
We'll share that information.
You're very kind. But what I would say is that we are, I believe, we're a unique organisation alongside, I say, the likes of Stonewall and Business Disability Forum, that offers organisations the first step towards bringing it to strategy and planning, because that's, again, we hear regularly that unless it's part of an organisation's plan or strategy, then it's difficult for advocates within the workplace to take things forward. So by engaging with an organisation like Stonewall, like Business Disability Forum, like the Age Diversity Forum, I think provides that vehicle for organisations to latch onto and begin to disseminate the message and the appreciation of the values that can be gained from developing that multi-generational workforce. So we're very much a facilitator from that perspective. We also offer some very practical services in terms of on the recruitment front. We have an employability side to our organisation as well. We're a national provider to the Department of Work and Pensions across the whole of the UK. And through that mechanism and through just people coming to us looking to support and help, looking to get back into the workplace, we have tens of thousands of people registering for that help and that support. So we can be a direct conduit for organisations to extend their consideration for bringing different skills, bringing different attributes, particularly the softer attributes that we hear a lot about as in demand from customers, from businesses. We can be a direct conduit for organisations to ensure not just that they're getting a broader range of applications, but actually they get to choose the best person for the role, because ultimately that's what businesses want when they're recruiting. And part of the, I talked about redeployment and transitioning, that's elements of the retention and retraining modules that we have as well. But we campaign and lobby with a small C&L. We've got direct support in both houses of Parliament. We've had recent conversations with the Prime Minister and the Women and Equalities Committee in Parliament to make some change, to make a difference. I was really glad to see in the recent budget there was one tenuous link to grab onto where there is incentives for organisations to consider recruiting veterans, force veterans, who are generally towards the older spectrum.
So
So
Steve, there's
it's
some
a number of
ideas on the
little-
chat as well that I'd like to share on what you can do. Would that be all right, Rena?
Yes, absolutely. If you can share it on the chat now, but in any event, we will email you all the link to the website and the relevant material, so you can also get in touch with Steve directly. I just with the final 5 minutes left, I also wanted to ask you, Jacqueline, for any specific individual tips. So we
Sure.
have an audience of 30 of us here, and it'll go out hopefully to the full 75 who've signed up. What can individuals do on this topic?
Okay, if we think about, you know, what we can do either as managers or members of a team when we go back, one is, I think, when we're setting up projects, make sure that we combine the generational capabilities on project teams. So we're using that breadth of knowledge and capability. So having project teams across the generations is great. Also, really understanding what motivates people as individuals. That kind of feeds into some of the things that organizationally we can do. But am I motivated? You know, we talked earlier about people not being offered training and development opportunities as much. But am I motivated by learning more? Am I motivated by different kinds of opportunities, secondments, etc.? I think too, this whole thing around knowledge sharing and creating an environment within our teams where we're sharing knowledge and we're valuing the experience of each of the team members. So we can create an environment by being curious, by being interested, and by asking questions of our colleagues beyond the day-to-day operational job.
All great tips. And those of you who have participated in any of my meetings, conversations, etc. before will know that I always end with a question to each one of the participants in the room, and that is, what will you do differently as a result of what you heard here today? And usually in a room, I would go around the table and around, getting everyone to contribute. Slightly more challenging in this case, although it's doable, I'm sure. What I'm going to ask you is, those of you who would like to contribute or have something that they are committing to doing differently as a result of something you've heard today, please put it in the chat and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. And maybe if there is a minute left, so Inga can share. I want to share with you one final thing before we thank our guests and move on, and that is what else is coming up for you and Big Fish. So the next expert interview is on neurodiversity, which takes place on the 30th of April. We have already so many of you signed up, and if you haven't signed up yet, so please do. And then in May, we're running one of our training sessions, and this time it's on influencing middle managers. So we have online training on the 14th of May, and that's a half-day session. We're going to run it in 90-minute chunks with a break in between, which gives you content and time to implement and practice, more content in implementation time. And then followed by a 1-hour webinar on the 20th for the content of that session as well. After we are finished here, we would be very grateful for your feedback. We have a very short feedback survey linked to it. It's a SurveyMonkey survey. As I said, we are a relatively new outfit, so anything you can tell us that works, that we can improve on or change, would be most appreciated. And also any kind of additional interest that you have that perhaps we haven't covered and you would like us to. And finally, to make sure that you do get all the updates for everything else that we do join our newsletter. All this information is going to be available as well in the follow-up email that will come afterwards. But all these things on the slides that are underlined are also URLs. So, when we send the PDF, you'll have the links there as well. So with that, I just wanted to check on the chat one more time. We have 1 more minute left. Inga, is there any commitments out there?
Yeah, sorry, needed to unmute myself. Yeah, loads of commitments there.
Great, well done.
Yeah,
Julia, can I just add something?
Yes, Steve.
Sorry, with the current situation now, I was moved to write a piece this morning, and I've put it out on our website, and I've called it Instinctive Culture. It probably covers a lot of what we've discussed today, and I'd really welcome people to read it. It won't take long, but any feedback on that and how people have been affected, and maybe if any of that helps, it'd be really good to receive some feedback. So.
Yeah, do send us the link as well, Steve, and I'll put it in the email.
Okay, will do.
Do we have time, Inga, for some commitments, or do we leave it?
Yeah, I can read some. Thank you, great. I'm going to share this at our next talk circle. I will discuss these ideas with my colleague who's on this call. Perfect. I will suggest my next meeting is to discuss these issues with a colleague in our career network. We're calling it the Inspire Initiative.
Great.
I love Jacqueline's point about sharing one another's experience. I think that's a great recommendation to slow down and take time to appreciate this. I will look to create the space to do this with my immediate international sales team in our May meeting. And then lots of thank yous from lots of people taking lots of notes. So I hope if you've been listening to the recording, you've also been taking notes, and thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our guests, Jacqueline Heron and Steve Anderson. It was delightful to have you here with us today, and I'm sure that there will be follow-up with both of you from the audience, and as well Inga and myself. Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to close the call now and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Anita. Look forward to seeing you on camera again next month on the Neurodiversity call. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Stay well.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Are we staying on the call, or are we coming off now too?
That was my question as well.
Okay. It looks as if Rena's off too, so yeah, I'll come on.
I was just making sure we put everyone else away, but Rena's also gone. So yeah, thank you so much. Because I was going to ask her if we can make a little list of tips that came up, and then I wasn't sure if she'd been taking notes or whether you would like to send this list. And I think you wanted to send that blog as well, Steve. Or
Yeah, I'll be happy. Let's say,
send the link to that blog, and you had a question about that as well, I believe. So it'd be good if we do that in there. We send the follow-up mail later today with the recording.
Fantastic, thank you.
And then if we can add your blog, and if there is any resources or links you'd like to add, Jacqueline, please feel free. Hi, Rena. Just asking, I thought it'd be nice as a